Hi, it's Nico. So today I thought we were going to look at a game between two of my students. Black is 6Q and white is 4Q, and these are two players who I know pretty well. I know their styles, and we're going to see some of this play out. Black in particular is very strong at whole board thinking, and white is strong at sort of close quarters fighting and reading. And we are going to see both of these things very clearly in this game. And probably to here, I think nothing special has happened in this game. This is sort of a normal opening. And black makes a choice here that is slightly unusual. It's perfectly fine. But black does invest another move building up this wall on the top side. Usually black will leave this in cente. Now, this is very much making an investment into building influence sort of in this kind of box. Now, my style probably would not be to do that immediately. If I wanted to do something in that kind of box, I would probably play an approach here. It's also perfectly okay to approach here or to do any number of other things. However, this is black's choice here. Now, the most usual move in this situation is for white to just extend. However, that's not what white does. White plays a more provocative move by playing this hane. Now, this hane is a perfectly okay move, but we do have to be aware that there is a little bit of a shortage of liberties in these two stones. And black immediately goes for it with a very savage move. I would say this is probably... It looks much stronger than what you would expect from a 6Q, to be honest. Like, this is a very strong move. White extends, which is probably the most natural shape, the one you would think of first. However, there is something to be a little bit weary of when black descends here, for instance. Probably the best move is to play here and you Atari here and when black runs. White is not completely clean in this corner. If we later run out, black here and white's actually not alive. So instead of that, usually when white wants to fight this way, white will give this Atari first, precisely for this purpose, to make sure that this group is not running into any kind of liberty issue with these two stones at triangle here. So this is the specific reason why usually this exchange is made. It is probably a little bit above the pay grade of these mid-Q players, mid-single-digit Q players doing this. So it's to be expected that white would extend here. It is the natural shape. It's usually going to be the best move in a situation that's like this. Now, black extends. Now, white plays this move. This is sort of a common theme that you will see in a lot of players around this rank. They don't want to play this move because when black extends here, this is very bad shape. They just don't want to play it anyway because it's an empty triangle. Oftentimes, you will see them playing this instead. You might notice that this is also an empty triangle anyway. This one also you will see sometimes, but black here threatens the snapback, so white has to connect anyway. And probably this is actually the best move. The reason that this is the best move is because the liberties of these two black stones are important. And any other move doesn't actually hurt the liberties of those stones, and you're going to end up with pretty bad shape no matter what. I think the move I've seen most often is this one. But this is also an empty triangle regardless, and even in this kind of situation when black descends here, white has some problems with the life of the corner group. So white descends here, just straight to the edge, and black jumps out. And at this point, we start this fight between groups A and group B. However, as we might notice when black... as we continue, white would very much like to keep playing from this group, maybe here or maybe jumping to the center or something like that, but he just doesn't have time because at some point this corner group is actually going to get in trouble. And this can be traced back to having missed this detail here with the Atari. Now, white is pretty good at reading, and he realizes this issue, which is why instead of continuing with this group that's floating in the center, these triangle stones, he comes back immediately to the corner. And this is actually not necessarily that bad of a fight for white. And the reason it's not so bad of a fight is because this black group here also does not have eyes. And so when white makes life in this corner, the black group is going to be hanging a little bit. Now, this Atari is a slight imprecision from black. However, it's not a serious one. Normally, black in this situation should extend here first. And then when white comes to capture, you get to play both of these moves in sente. Instead, when black just plays here, white can capture, and this move is no longer sente. However, in this game, white also makes a mistake here and descends instead of capturing, which means black gets this move in sente anyway, and there is absolutely no punishment for having missed the descent at A. So white captures the stone, and at this point, this is a little bit painful for white. Like, the situation, I think, already slightly favors black, because there was this fight between Group A and Group B, and the next move in the fight should have felt like it should have been white's, but white has to run back to defend the corner, which means black gets the next move in this fight. Now, the defensive solid move would just be to live with something like this, but I actually have absolutely no problem. This is probably the move I would have recommended, is black turning here and bringing the fight directly to these stones. These stones have liberty problems. There are various issues with them. Now, at this point, I think most players who were in this situation would want to defend these stones, jumping out to here, jumping out this way, making a longer jump, one of these. If you're a really fighty player, you might see that this is sort of a key point in black's shape and just directly go for it. There's a good chance this is an overplay, but this is something that I think could be considered, particularly if you're very aggressive and good at fighting. However, I know the way white thinks. This is a player I know pretty well. I understand what he's thinking in this position. So what he's thinking is that in this point, this black group has run out, is no longer with eyes. That's sort of what white can claim in exchange for having had to add moves to live at A. So at this point, since that group is without eyes, and this triangle group is also without eyes, essentially he thinks, well, this group's going to have to run this way. This group is also going to have to run this way. So the direction in which this fight is moving is toward the bottom of the board. So what he does is he jumps ahead of the running path for the black group here. Now, this is a very interesting move. This is a topic I've talked about with this student a few times, that I think this is sort of very high-level thinking. However, you do have to take a little bit of care, because this is a move that is planning for a fight, and black could just anticipate this and prevent the fight from ever happening, for instance, by defending here, or by playing here to immediately take the advantage of these stones. You have to have a good excuse for having played this in these situations also, instead of the more natural kind of moves here. Now, that being said, I think this would be pretty reasonable if black did anything like that for white to play here. This is a good, strong shape. And I think probably in the future, if black continues to attack these three stones, it might not be unreasonable just to sacrifice them. In exchange, for instance, for getting extra moves against the corner, something like this, and then also get sente. This is perfectly fine for white. White's in great shape. Or maybe you could even take the eyes of the corner. We would have to think about that also, right? So instead of that, black plays on this side, which is also perfectly okay. This is sort of indicating that he's not afraid of white, right? And in this position, I expected white to either jump out with something like this, or to play here directly. However, white did neither of those things. Instead, white plays here. Now, according to AI, this move is fine, but according to me, this is not something I would ever recommend, because black just immediately defends here. And at this point, there is really no longer any attack against the A group. And since there's no longer any attack against the A group, the only way we can justify this group's existence, the reason that it's on the board anymore, you'd have to attack the B group. However, the B group is very hard to attack. And since both the A and B groups are relatively safe, then these guys are mostly cutting stones. And if they're mostly cutting and they're cutting apart two safe groups, they're kind of a hard group to handle. The main purpose that they still have, I guess, is to make influence in this direction, but that influence is significantly undercut by the fact that this stone at C is already ahead of white in that direction anyway. Which is what, to my mind, makes these stones possibly a candidate for sacrifice. Now, we were saying that maybe their main fighting purpose would be to attack the B group, so one idea I had was just to take the eyes from the B group this way, and when black comes out with something like this, maybe, one option is to decide whether the fight of A versus B is actually a fight you want to try and maybe run out like this. I'm not sure I believe this is a good fight, particularly because this group here at A on the right side, it's really not a group, it's just one stone, but as we fight and we move out in this direction, you're sort of going to have one weak group here and one weak group here, and it's going to be very difficult to handle them both. So another idea, instead of trying to run out with 3, might be to just sacrifice them. I would be thinking of a move sort of like this, and just sort of allow black to eat them in exchange maybe for making this influence in this direction, which is what one of the main purposes of the group was to begin with, and you could also defend this group this way, and you have some influence pointing at the center. This is also a possibility. Now, I did look at this with AI, and AI's move was this one, and I think this is really smart. Essentially, it thinks that black should probably still defend this group, because that's the main point. So black defends here somehow, and then white continues to have more forcing moves against the side group. Even though the side group is not dead, and even though one is not forcing, you have more forcing moves against it, and this allows white to again build up the influence in the center. It's a similar thing, but white doesn't have to give up square stones. Now, I'm not nearly smart enough to come up with that myself. But since this triangle group just seems like a bad group to me, it does maybe make sense to see why white does what he does, which is to essentially temporarily just give up on these stones. It just looks like a bad fight, so white decides not to fight it. And I think this is okay. AI really suggested running out with this group. I first expected running out with this group, and the more I thought of it, the more I realized I just didn't like the prospect of the fight. So I didn't come up with this one, but I did come up with this idea, which involves the sacrifice. Instead of that, white plays this, it's probably fine. AI complains about basically any move except for something like this. It thought my move was about equally bad. So we get to here, and black in this position essentially decides that the most important group on the board probably is this black group, because if that black group is safe, we really have killed off the main meaning, the reason for existence of the square stones, at which point white really is kind of almost forced to sacrifice them. So probably the most normal move to defend the group is something like this, but black comes up with something that I think is borderline genius. This is very, very good. This is sort of way above the pay grade of what I would have expected from a 6Q. So the idea of this move is that if white responds with the normal shape, black is going to honey on this side, and these stones will naturally defend this important group, and in fact probably do so in sente. And this is an improvement on the situation which we talked about earlier, where black just plays here but ends up with gote. White can either defend the corner or might even not, and instead play elsewhere. So this would be very good. However, for white to respond this way would be a mistake. So white sees exactly what black is up to. And when white sees exactly what black is up to, essentially, this is a kind of move, this sort of attachment is trying to say that normally you would play here, but white plays out in this direction, which hurts this group. Right? So white is willing to maybe accept this locally worse result in the corner, where are we? Black here, 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 here. For instance, if we looked at just this box, this result is locally kind of bad for black. But since black does get to choose the direction instead of allowing white to do so. And since this direction is so important, white does immediately sniff what black is up to. This is a very smart move. And it plays to interfere with this. And at this point, we start to see how white is trying to stir up trouble with the triangle group. Now, if you ask me at this point, until black makes contact here, this sort of felt like it was round one, and it looks very clear to me that this round one went to black. Black's groups are all pretty safe. They're in good shape. They have a lot of power. And these white stones here that look like they're just a bad group, and this other stone on the side here, it's not quite heavy, so it's not clear that it immediately needs defense, but on the other hand, we also don't want to see black attack it. There's a lot of stuff. So there's a lot of sort of white stones over here that look a little bad. So I feel like round one of this fight went to black. Now, instead, we go here, and the fight continues. Now, this Atari is the first move, at least at level 4 done, that AI Sensei told me was a mistake for white. And it is sort of a local loss, of course, but there is a sense in which the loss is entirely local, because white is aiming at bringing these stones back and attacking this group. How reasonable is this fight? We will see as it goes on. It's probably not 100% reasonable, but there is a notion, and I sort of see why white feels this way, that he is losing this game already. Maybe white isn't quite losing this game if white's able to find this really clever move that AI came up with, but I couldn't find it either, so it makes sense. So instead, white's willing to maybe take a little more of a local loss in this corner than he took anyway, in order to start this fight on his own terms. So black hanes, this is an important move for splitting white into two groups, right? And white plays a double hane, and here is where we see this white player's really, really sharp and careful reading. Now, there is something to be pointed out here, that this is a correspondence game. I don't know, for instance, how well we would have done in this fight in the corner, which turned out pretty well, if both players had had sort of a shorter time to think about things. Now, this double hane is a very severe move, essentially trying to limit the communication of this group to the outside. It doesn't look like it's actually in trouble, but it does have to prove that it can find eyes, which it shouldn't have too much trouble doing. Now, black here, this is a great concept. This is called force before defending. The target move for this black group to defend itself is just to play here and fix his eye shape. And this is a very normal move, and I'm sure black thought of this move. But he says, okay, if this stone is captured, I never ever have to play A. So this is a Sente move that I would like to play before I decide for sure that I'm going to play A. Because at least at some point, it looked like maybe one of the possible directions of this game was going to be for white to sacrifice this. So black makes this forcing move first, and then also hanes on this side. So now we see sort of why this might not have been a safe way to play for white, is that he's split into three groups. And I don't think any of the three groups here is necessarily completely safe. However, white does cut back, and white was trying to make a mess, and it looks like this mess is starting to happen. Now, black extends here. This continues the idea of making forcing moves before defending a triangle. Now, it is interesting that white here does have a tactical option. White can give this Atari and then squeeze, as follows. Right. However, white does eventually have to pull out with these stones, and the way white pulls out jumping here, it still gives black a chance to live in the corner, and to live on the side anyway. So it's unclear whether that's actually a gain for white of any kind. It was my first instinct when I saw this. Again, white could defend, and instead you can force before defending. The force might not be a good move. So it makes sense for white not to play it. Now at this point, black tries to force again with this move, and this actually might be a slight misstep. It is sort of a natural-looking move, but let's first assume that white plays this bamboo joint. It does help this group defend itself. Now, you might say that it helps that group defend itself, but you build something against these stones, and that is sensible as an attack against those stones. However, there are other ways to do essentially some attack on those stones, for instance, like this. Now, this is not 100% forcing against these stones. For instance, if white just connects here, it looks like there's some kind of ladder here, but black has a shortage of liberties, both on this side and also on this side. And even if there was a ladder, it doesn't quite work. But there's still forcing moves here, which if black had a couple more liberties. So there's a lot of agi in this area. There's many other ways to threaten to capture these stones, which will use this stone in a different way instead of extending here. For instance, at this point in the game, one of the moves that comes to mind might be even to play this empty triangle, but that makes it look like this, makes it very clear that this move is bad if you ever think about it. So instead, probably, I think this exchange is not the right idea, and instead black should just immediately play here. It is not easy for white to immediately annihilate this stone. However, I think this is sort of a minor issue. Now, white plays this move instead of the bamboo joint. I thought this was very interesting. This is not because white is weak and doesn't understand shapes and thinks empty triangles are good or something. It's not that white missed the bamboo joint. The reason white plays this, there is only one possible reason, is because he thinks that the liberties of these two stones are very, very important. And he's willing to accept bad shape in order to damage those liberties. So, for instance, when black comes back to defend here, white could actually just play here. And these stones are locally captured. Now, I did, when I talked to my students about this game, I didn't review the whole thing for them, but I did say to black, when I said this, I said, probably if we keep only your moves up until around this point, it looks almost like you're a down-ranked player and you are taking white to school. This is black has played absolutely fantastically to this point. There was sort of a minor misstep with this Atari when he forgot to extend to A, or maybe didn't know that that was what you were supposed to do in that shape. And there's also a minor misstep here. However, I think that both of those are moves that make some kind of sense. On the other hand, I think this cut is a move that looks like, it's a very, very strong move that felt possibly above his pay grade. And also, just in general, even though most of his other moves, at least to here, are very smooth, there's a very natural flow to them, and he doesn't miss any steps. Like, none of them seem above his pay grade, but they're very well chosen. This move is, frankly, this is fantastic. This is probably better than what I would have done. I would have played the much more boring move here. So he's done a great job so far. And I'd say probably to here. When I looked at this, I was just trying to convince myself that I actually believed that white is a stronger player, because it just doesn't look like that. At this point, it looks like black is pretty much beating up white. However, as this fight continues, we will see black make a few missteps. And the first one is here. Probably the best shape. You just do this. If white tries to do something like this, that's fine. This is really not something to ever worry about. You have two eyes, and it's not a problem. Instead, black does this, and I am not entirely sure why he picks this shape. There's something a little bit unusual about this shape. There's something sort of counterintuitive, because at this point when white does this, this is not yet an eye. Black will still be fine. Maybe not. Yes, black will still be fine here because white can't kill him because he has this cut and will survive. However, this only works when white has the shortage of liberties, which means that probably white moves like A are forcing, which they really shouldn't be. Now, white plays here, and here's the inexplicable happens. I think, like, maybe this is the kind of thing I would expect under normal circumstances. However, this is a correspondence game. So I really thought that black was just going to play here and live. However, black makes, I would say, a move that just feels like a blunder at this level. Not a blunder sort of in a normal game, like this is something I would expect, that this kind of mistake could happen, but in a correspondence game, you have enough time to figure out that white can cut here. And so black kind of almost immediately falls apart. Now, it is something to take note of that from the moment white's doing this stuff, even though black is locally not alive yet, if we keep following the proverb that we talked about earlier about forcing before defending, white is very short on liberties, both at square and at A, right? So it does make a lot of sense. This is the AI keep suggesting to push out here, regardless of the life and death situation on top, because it believes that black is going to be able to maybe even capture white before he loses the top group. And at this point, even though black is locally dead, AI still believes that black has time to push here and try to capture these stones before his stones die. However, in this fight, things get a little bit messy, and white manages to save his stones, at which point black pretty much has decides that he has no choice but to resign. And the rest of this feels like after black messes up life and death here, the game is close to instantly over. There are still some Tsujis we can look at, like this move here. But it is sensible. It is a sensible result. So I think we can skip a lot of the technical issues of the rest of the fight. Really, this whole game was a little bit decided in white's favor when black makes some shape errors here. First, missing this move that makes sort of immediately makes eyes for the group. Instead, playing this one, which leaves this sort of error that where the eyes are not so definite. And second, makes this sort of tactical blunder. And I feel like this is what defined the game. However, so there is a lot to be said for black's early play, where he takes advantage of white, and there's also a lot to be said about white's sort of very creative fighting ideas. Primarily, I think this move. This is this player's style, and I sort of saw this coming. But I still think it's a very creative and it's a very nice idea for a fighting move. And I also thought that his responses here and the way that this fight begins, by making this Hane and then the double Hane, are all some very strong fighting ideas, which show that I think both of these players have quite a lot of promise. I think that's most of what I have to say about this game for now. I hope you enjoyed this review. Take care. I will see you at a later time.